Hello, this is the great Johannes speaking for yet another live stream podcast thing episode. I've prepared some bunch of random topics that I want to go over. I've got them on my screen here because I use TikTok Live Studio on my laptop. And on the other side here, I've got your comments. So if you want to interact with me and discuss some matters, then feel free go ahead and shoot your questions at me. All right. I was reading some British magazine called The Spectator and also Spiked Online. These are all Zionist magazines, I suppose. Oh, I can't say the Z word. You get censored on TikTok. But I was also looking into here. I got it on my screen. Foreign Policy magazine. And what struck me is the headline up top. It's time for Ukraine to accept an ugly peace. That's like an admission. They're admitting that Ukraine has lost the war against Russia in eastern Ukraine, which is really interesting because our media, including the Dutch media, German media, all the media in the West, were telling us the whole time that the Russians were losing, and how come now then that they've won? This is retarded, you know? As Ukrainian President Zelensky awaits ceasefire talks and negotiations to end Russia's war in his country, he should reflect on an earlier chapter in this tragic conflict. Right? I think the policy people, meaning the ones who actually write the decisions that politicians sell to us, because politicians are just marketeers. They sell us the policy that they are given by people up top. To give you an example of how it kind of works in the Netherlands, all the politicians in our parliament are puppets. They're all actors. And because behind the scenes we have the secretaries of state and so on who really run the show, they tell the politicians what to tell the people. And then even those, the secretaries of state and so on, they have bosses. And those bosses report to the Raad van State in the Netherlands, or the Council of the State Council, right? And the State Council gets its information or its instructions from, who knows, very rich elites, because the people working for the State Council, they work for the king, for the royalty, right? So this kind of betrays how it really works. The European nobility, aristocracy, the old aristocracy, behind the scenes, they're still in charge. They're calling the shots. They're instructing nations what to do, right, in terms of foreign policy or economic policy and so on, right? Yeah, I see some people responding. I'm going to try to keep it interactive, so once in a while yeah, hello, Johannes. Hello, Dazo. All right. Did you see those African migrants get forced out of a French theater by French police? I haven't seen it yet, but I had seen when they were squatting the building. Yeah, I had heard about the fact that they took over this theater, but they've been thrown out now. Okay. I've been seeing a lot of violence lately, mostly terrorist attacks against Native Europeans. Also in Texas, I heard there was the same thing over and over, right? Car or truck slamming into a crowd, killing people. In Germany, in Mannheim, there was a woman set on fire on the train. No one cares. People care more about the wombat that lady picked up in Australia. Nobody really seems to care about our casualties, our victims of this war. I mean, it does feel as though we are at war. We're at war with terrorists living in our country, right? Those are the ones killing us. Right? Maybe we should do something about it sometime, right? What motivates your activism? I grew up in the Netherlands. You tell me something went wrong. This is a country, a feminist country, where I grew up in as a child, that hates boys, hates men, blames. It's a far left country, and the population is also far left, and that never sat well with me. I don't know how to explain it. All I know is that from the age of 16 or so, I became politically aware. Like, I became self-aware at age 16, and I just realized that, why do I care about a country that hates me? Well, I don't. So I care about the conservative civilization that we used to have. Like if I look back at the 19th century Europe, it contains almost everything that I would support. It was a manly, patriarchal, almost warlike culture, a warrior culture. And we don't have that anymore. The Netherlands is a playground for children, and it shouldn't be. I mean, we're being ruled by these upper class people behind the scenes, as I just mentioned earlier, who never really explain their motives to the people. And democracy is just a sham. It's like a smokescreen, right? So you tell me, what motivates your activism? You know, I started speaking because nobody was talking about the things that I thought were obviously in need of being discussed, you know? Oh, I was born with a reasonable intelligence, so I see myself as above religion. But in Europe, it just happens to be so that Christianity replaced heathendom, the Odinism, right? And so one might argue that Christ in Northern Europe is like Odin in disguise anyway. And so I think New Testament Christianity, which is actually very meek and very soft compared to the Judeo-supremacism of the Old Testament, the Hebrew supremacism, still, I think it is the correct religion for the European people, for the masses, for the ordinary people. They need a sort of guidance in their lives, give them a purpose to live for. And I like the Catholic attitude that says just being a believer isn't good enough. You also have to act, right? You have to, you can make mistakes, but then you got to show a willingness to go after your mistakes and try to fix them. That's the Catholic way. Like, it's not enough simply to be a bad person, but you say you believe in God and therefore you can go to heaven. No. I think you also need to make amends. Within your means, of course. It's not to be very harsh. I'm not the Inquisition or something, but yeah. All right. Playing some music softly in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but yeah, Netherlands became a beta country. Yeah. No one is afraid of it. It's just like, imagine you are grown-ups, right? Somebody asks here, why are the Westerners so afraid about Islam and Sharia law? Imagine you're an adult, and all of a sudden you have these really weird, dumb children barging into your house, demanding that you live by their laws. So that's what it is. It's not a fear. It's simply disgust. No, I don't do guests today. So I made a video about this earlier today. I posted it. Most people speaking English online nowadays aren't white people. This is different from what it was 15 years ago. Up until like 2010 or so, most people speaking English online on the social media were people of European descent, right? I'm Dutch and I speak English. I use the English internet most of the time because the Dutch internet is less informative, right? But things have changed since 2010s or so. You might have noticed, for example, on Reddit, the whole attitude on Reddit was very quickly became far left. But why? Well, the answer is English-speaking Indians flooded the social medias, and of course they hate the West, they hate Britain, they hate European colonialism and so on. So what happens is you have these white leftists who now feel empowered and emboldened by the fact that they have such a large support base out on the internet. What they don't really realize is that white leftists are traitors who have allied themselves with foreigners who also hate our countries. So it turns out that roughly about 60% of the English-speaking internet nowadays, 2025, is non-white. And take down the 20% of that total that is white leftists, you get a supermajority of 80%. 80% of English-speaking people are either foreigners or white leftists who hate the West. Meaning the pro-Western, pro-European voice is a 20% minority in the English, on the English-speaking side of the internet, and that's really shocking, right? Hold on. So book recommendations, yeah. The book I discussed last time was the unintended reformation. The Unintended Reformation by Brad S. Gregory. All right, so you see what happens, right? This is, by the way, according to game theory, treason is a losing strategy. So a traitor is somebody who sides with the outsiders, right? And that's what white leftists are doing. They feel so empowered and so in love with the validation they're getting from foreigners who also hate our countries, that they're siding with the foreigners against their own people. There's this meme that says that that leftist people care more about rocks than about their own people, but it sure does look like that nowadays, right? The book, The Unintended Reformation, you can look it up. I did a podcast about it. I've uploaded it to my YouTube at The Great Johannes podcast on YouTube. It's about the unintended consequences of the Reformation. So I did a whole video about that already. So what about Farage? Nigel Farage. I'm going to discuss a whole bunch of different topics now, so you can respond to me as you want. Nigel Farage, what's he doing dealing with guys named Yusuf Muhammad or whatever? Isn't he supposed to be like the reform candidate? But now, of course, I get it. He's controlled opposition. Nigel Farage is controlled opposition. And what he calls reform, right? He doesn't mean Britain. He means he wants to reform right-wing voters and turn them into pro-Islam, pro-multicultural people. Like they're doing the same thing with Kanye adopting the swastika. They're doing it with Candace Owens, right? They're doing it with, you name them, other people. Kemi Badenoch, the so-called conservative leader of the UK. We have them also in the Netherlands and in Germany. They're trying to put these so-called right-wing brown people in our faces everywhere, pretending as though they're also conservatives because it's just about our values. Yes, as long as we uphold our values, it doesn't matter that white people go extinct, right? So that's just fucking disgusting. Like, I think reform, what do you have now? Now you have the Homeland Party, but what if that's just another trap, right? So you switch from conservative to reform, then from reform to Homeland, and eventually they're just wasting your time. It's the same trick over and over and over again until there's no one left who bothers voting, right? Yeah, it's definitely treason. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to keep up with your comments as well as I'm trying to discuss these topics, but that's okay. Johannes, yeah. Who is this guy? It's me. Does the USA want to destroy the European Union because it's not useful anymore, right? The European Union, in my understanding, was co-founded by the US State Department and funded by the CIA, partially, at least. And so the idea of the European Union was, in my view, to be a market for American products like Nike, Starbucks, and so on, that we would buy, and also a supplier to the US for like cheap Adidas shoes and cheap German cars, cheap for Americans, right? And that has come to an end because Europe doesn't have a consumer or a manufacturing base anymore. It's being destroyed. And I think, well, what I've been told was by smarter people is that they're just moving everything to China, and then the so-called global elites may soon abandon ship. They may just abandon the Western world, and literally they will move to China. Like, look at Zuckerberg and so on with his mixed children, right? They're just going to move to China probably. But, I'm not worried about these things. To me, it isn't about money and stuff. It's about blood and honor, so to speak. It's not about external visuals. It's about internal strengths and qualities and drive and competence and the will to live and the will to face death now and then and feel what that's like if you get really close to it, right? I was watching ice hockey recently. I was never a fan of any sport. Like, people always tell me, like, if you don't like soccer, you're a homo or something. But then I discovered ice hockey, and I love ice hockey. That's the sport for me. It's more violent than soccer, right? Soccer is extremely boring in my view. I like ice hockey when they, body check each other and so on, like slam each other into the wall, and that's just much more interesting to watch. I'm also trying to learn to play ice hockey myself now. We have a local ice skate rink where you can practice during the weekdays or so. So I go there once a week with my skates, trying to get the hang of it. I noticed that I need to improve the muscles in my quads a lot to be able to do the moves. I can skate pretty well, but I can't do the ice hockey moves, like what do they call it, deacon left and right and so on. So yeah, and the point is, our whole societies have become meek and weak, and we should be more like warriors who are not afraid to, get close to the edge of life and feel what life is really supposed to be about. So what I was talking about is the difference between internal and external validations. Internal validations is all about about growing yourself as a person mentally and physically, and expanding yourself. Also then, as a consequence of that, improving your finances, and you want to have a nice house. That is then the extra extension of that starts with you within yourself. It would be so totally wrong if we organize our whole society for the mirror. For what do we look like in the mirror? We want to optimize our looks and so on. It's like you have those bodybuilders who train for the mirror image of themselves. But what do they really do with their muscle other than showing it off at their competitions? Why not go play ice hockey or do boxing or do some whatever you're into, snowboarding or something, and then train for what you want to do in the real world. So that's my point. It's more about developing stamina, endurance, speed, agility, strength, size and mass, also fine, right? You want to be in wrestling or something, you want to be big and strong, something like that. But just training for the mirror, which is what I think the West is doing nowadays. The whole Western civilization is just trying to keep up appearances. We're trying to look good in other people's eyes, which is not what our goal is supposed to be. We are supposed to be people who... we're supposed to be people who have the nerve to disregard or discount much of the outside world and focus more on that spiritual strength that we experience from within, right? Hi, Jonathan Young. Yeah, you watch my videos? Yeah, great, man. I appreciate people watch what I have to say. I will upload this episode, by the way, to my YouTube channel at The Great Johannes, or you can also go to my www.jmk.info Substack newsletter. And if you want to donate, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JohannesMK. Yeah, I got to start pushing my my grifting out there, because every little thing helps, right? It helps. All right. So this episode, this stream, I'm just going to go through all sorts of topics, whatever pops up. So the competency crisis. Did you read that story where a DEI hire air traffic controller admitted that they had to Google what they were supposed to be doing right in the moment where they're trying to direct a plane, right? That's just nuts. So one of the phenomena affecting declining civilizations is when expected results aren't met. So you expect something to improve, but it's not happening. What happens then is you relax the admission criteria, you will relax the standards and so on to allow more people to come in, right? And this then usually just ends in catastrophe. And that's exactly what's happened with the DEI hires. They brought in more women and minorities, right? And less white men, less competent white men. And what happened is the expected result of women being superior qualified leaders and minorities being superior qualified technicians, it didn't happen. There's now a shortage of competent people because the white men who were competent have been sidelined and replaced with other preferred candidates if you meet the LGBT spectrum or something, right? And so the strangeness of this all is because now DEI didn't work. Yeah, you got more women and minorities in, but the results aren't there. It didn't work. It did not improve anything. Everything got worse. And now they're going to relax the standards even more to get even more people in, instead of accepting and admitting that they were simply wrong about doing so. Right. So there was something else on my mind that I just forgot. Can't think of it anymore. Right. They start hiring diverse people, but at the expense, deliberately at the expense of competence. So they're not looking at competence first. They're looking at, are you a brown, disabled, black woman or something, right? That's just stupid. Like, what are you doing? You're murdering your society. Relating to that, I recently started believing that, yeah, poor people really are poor because of themselves. It's not that maybe they were born with a lacking genetic endowments or something, or without financial help from their families or whatever. This may be true, but the real reason why they're not succeeding beyond that, beyond what they're given, is that they give up. They literally the literal difference between poor people and wealthier or more successful people is that the successful people groom themselves more. They brush their teeth, comb their hair, take care of their clothing. Even if they can't afford expensive clothes, they make sure that it's all neat and washed and cleaned and dried and ironed, right? And it's the poor people who just don't do that. They don't want to do that. I don't want to take care of myself. And that's the general attitude of the needy class, the class of needy people who always feel they need to be babysit and given everything that they want. Like, where's mommy to fold your clothes when you're in your 40s, right? It's that attitude of, I'm helpless, I don't want to take care of myself, and and crucially, I don't even want to learn how I'm supposed to take care of myself. Because as soon as you switch that switch on in your head, say, hey, wait a minute, I can learn to take better care of myself. Hey, I'm going to do that. I'm going to learn how to take better care of myself. And then from that, everything else flows. You're going to go to the gym. You're going to go for a swim, for a walk. You're going to stretch. You're going to brush your teeth, right? You're going to comb your hair. You're going to get haircuts. You're going to get cheap clothing from the thrift store for $1, but you're going to get something that looks nice on you, right? And so from that principle of, hey, I can learn to take better care of myself. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep doing that. In fact, I'm going to get good at it. I'm going to learn how to get good at taking care of myself. Those people obviously become way more successful than the other crowd that says, I don't want to take care of myself. I want a subscription to Loser magazine, and I want to blame everyone else, right? We just can't do that, Yeah, sometimes they're not given a chance. Yeah, true. But I have not been given chances a lot of times in my life, and I just kind of like shrug it off. Okay, fine. That's so be it, though, right? I didn't then immediately demand the government to give me a free house and a car or something, right? I suppose that's my point. Now, talking of physical activity, recently I have been starting to improve myself as well. I start going to the gym to do deadlifts once a week, and it's a very heavy exercise. Of course, I try to do the heaviest weights I can do. First, I do 10 times my maximum, and then I do whatever else I can still do. So deadlifts, I want to improve the leg strength and my spinal column, the muscles in your back. Like since I started training deadlifts, in just 2 or 3 months, I discover I have all sorts of muscles in my back that I didn't know I had. I basically took my whole back for granted, as though it's just there, right? And now you start training that thing and you feel like, ooh, that's weird. What are all these muscles? Yeah. And I start doing squats as well, with the bar in your neck, doing squats. I do everything very safely, because I saw a video of this big ass bodybuilder who broke his neck and died from squatting in a dangerous way. Right, be careful with your spine. Yeah, but you build it up, of course. You're not going to do it stupid. I also started swimming because I as a kid, I took a lot of swimming lessons because I had to. I was forced to take it. But I'm reasonably good at swimming, so I started swimming again. But with swimming, I noticed I didn't have the endurance, right? The stamina to do like front crawl or freestyle. That's freestyle swimming. And so I started working on my endurance. And I had this question in my mind, like, wait a minute. I know you're supposed to eat protein to build muscle. I get that. But what are you supposed to eat for stamina and endurance and so on? Well, it turns out you do need carbs. So I think the whey protein companies are trying to sell you way more protein than you really need. A guy my size, I'm 6'5", I don't need 300 grams of protein a day. I could probably do with 100 grams or so, right? And that's including synthesizing and repairing muscle that I've used during my deadlifts. I really don't need to eat that much. So I think if you overeat on protein, by the way, it's going to get converted into carbs anyway inside your body. So you don't want to overeat on protein because you get too many carbs in anyway. And right, strength training, eating enough protein is the ticket to longevity. Yeah, that's the whole point. I realized that, your muscle mass determines how long you'll live. And the reason why men die sooner than women is because when men get their pensions, they quit working, they quit using their bodies, and they very rapidly begin losing muscle. And that's why men usually die before women do. Because women, although they have less muscle than men, they don't lose as much muscle later in life. So they get to last longer, right? The majority of the women, they like the multicultural idea, but no one wants to live in the Middle East yet. That's true. Yeah. I also started practicing the trumpet and so on. I started doing other things. I realized that I can do so much more than I was doing before. I guess I kind of like cleaned up some clutter in my head, and I was able to like sort things out. And then I cleared up so much time and energy and willpower basically to go and do all the other things like deadlifting, swimming. I do sprints once in a while. I go to the park for some sprints to get some speed in as well. By the way, sprinting, just 5 sprints of 10 seconds each, but all out, right? 5 times 10 seconds, all out with say a minute break in between. You get growth hormone from that. Growth hormone is what rejuvenates your whole body. It makes you look younger. Right, really. No, really. Growth hormone is what kids have for growing. And when you do sprints as an adult, you get more growth hormone and it rejuvenates you. It's really true. And so, yeah, anyway. No, I don't look so young, I think. Anyway, hey Jonas, hey Shitza. All right. Yeah, that's also an odd thing. The women aren't drafted to the army. So the whole story about Ukraine is dunking men in war. So basically, I've always been wondering, is that war even really real, or is it just meant to purge as many white men as possible? Because now they're sending kids, I saw an article in the Dutch news that said Ukrainian teenagers are now dressing up with military fatigues. They're sending them to war. They're sending their teenagers to war now, right? And then we're next. Then the European men, they're going to send the Dutch, the UK, the French, the German, the Swedes, the Poles. I think Italy said they wouldn't send anybody, and Hungary and Italy refused to send them. Clever. Why can't we be that smart, Views on climate change. I think climate changes are boring. I don't care if it does or doesn't happen. We'll just adapt. So I think there's a possibility that global elites are simply trying to clean up white men by purging us in fake wars, and that there really is no conflict between Russia, Europe, and the USA. That it's just, all the Trilateral Commission that Henry Kissinger founded. It included Russia, obviously. So Russia, Europe, and the USA were part of the Trilateral Committee. I think those trilateralists are still at work behind the scenes, and a lot of what we perceive through the media is just completely fake. I think it's always possible that the media system is entirely fake. You know? So why are you pro-Russia? Because I'm not. Why do you ask such a stupid question? You know? You love Joanna's, yeah. Seems a bit like the later years of the war in Germany with kids and stuff. Exactly. Near the end of World War II, you had teenagers defending Berlin, and they died. You know, this is bizarre. Like, why can't we ever? Like, this goes back to what I just previously discussed about internal validations and external validations. Why can't we have governments who take care of developing their people's talents, qualities, strengths, competencies from within? And then, of course, we establish ourselves, right? We become dominant. We dominate a territory that we can defend. And then we work hard for the economy. And hey, we could have more children and we'd send them out as immigrants, as emigrants to the rest of the world to conquer some more, right? Instead of having to be the sponge that absorbs everybody else's unwanted people. We could just turn this whole thing around. But somehow our elites don't want that. They want us to slowly just die out and die off. And the really difficult stuff here is that the normies, you know, the normie patients, the simple civilians among us, they'll never get it. So how do we deal with this? We have to somehow, I already thought of a solution, by the way, how to deal with it. If we could get the normie people to perceive their ruling elites as disgusting, I think disgust is the key here, as disgusting people that they wouldn't want to be associated with anymore. I think that would create a permanent rift between the people and these fake European elites. If we could get the ordinary people to feel disgusted with them. So we got to work on that. I think that may be the solution. I spout out anti-Ukraine stuff. No, I'm the one defending the men getting killed. Over 1 million white men were killed in eastern Ukraine. That's fucking insane. You want to kill them? So then you are anti-Ukraine. See? Let's keep things straight. Yeah. The cover needs to fall for the elites. If people would only realize what awful, disgusting people these elites really are, I think the pendulum would swing. Oh, speaking of the pendulum swinging, we got the situation in the USA that Trump really is kind of starting to deport people, and he doesn't care about the empathy and the sympathy for them, right? Oh, these poor migrants, it's just socioeconomics, like he doesn't care and just deports them anyway, which is a great idea, right? I think this will also happen, that normie populations, of course, have their emotions. They're not stable the whole time. They change. And I think, might they also be fed up at some point with the sympathy, in eternal sympathy, the eternal empathy for the poor arrival, the poor refugee from Africa? Why can't we help them? Why can't we give them food? Why don't we teach them how to build their own countries, right? In fact, we shouldn't even teach them. Why don't they just figure it out themselves, right? That's it, I think. I think the normie population, their attitude is slowly going to change. The pendulum will swing, and they're going to stop caring so much about having empathy for others, which is a luxury belief. To be able to care for others is a luxury. That means you have to be well off. And when that stops, when the working middle class people in countries like the UK and Germany realize that they're the ones paying for everybody else's free housing and free lunch and free cars even, and at some point they realize they can't keep affording that all the time. I call them the working competent. These are people with some skills and diplomas. They can do something. The working competent, who are earning all the taxes, right? They eventually, I think, will simply quit. They will also prefer applying for welfare, because why work so hard and get so little for it in return? You can't even afford a house in the UK, right? Or nor in the Netherlands or in Germany, right? Right, Epstein Island. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, if you would expose these elites and their connections to what they do on these islands, if that were actually exposed, yeah. Do you see women moving to Iran or Turkey? No. All right. That's a good point. So the majority of white women certainly wouldn't want to live in those places. So yeah. Yeah, I think Ursula von der Leyen, this fake leader from the European Union, yes, she's gonna bankrupt the middle classes basically. Have you seen what's happening in Ireland, Janice? Yeah, I heard. Well, yeah, recently I did hear news out of Ireland. Yeah, entire towns are being swamped with migrants. You're losing yourself. You're losing your identity. It's awful. So what about the attacks on Tesla? Lots of Democrat terrorists or protesters are setting fire to Tesla cars. It feels organized like the BLM protests, like the Black Lives Matters. It was obviously funded by people with a lot of money, like Soros and his Open Society foundations, right? And so that's I got the following impression, that there are multiple deep states at work, at least two really big ones, like the one that Trump represents, and perhaps the one that Soros represents, and Biden and Obama and so on. So you have multiple deep states vying for power, right? And that's why this happens. You get this internal conflict where one deep state is attacking the other, right? Anyway, I think that's what's happening. I'm sure that Elon Musk knows who's really behind these attacks. Anyway, he must know it already. So I got the impression that you have these internal struggles, also perhaps fueled by foreign secret services, of course. But the internal struggles might break up the USA, and same with the UK and Germany and so on. I mean, at what point do you think people will finally psychologically start panicking over these terrorist attacks, these continuous terrorist attacks over and over and over again? A car or a truck slamming into a crowd, right? Or you have shooters or bombers, right? Mass shooters. It happens over and over and over again. At what point do you think people will finally, like ordinary, the normies, when will they finally start to panic over this? Because when they do start panicking, I think the governments of the West will immediately enact some kind of a martial law with extreme restrictions and extreme. Maybe that's what they're preparing all this digital currency stuff for. They're going to, if it happens, if there is going to be like a widespread panic among the average populations of the West, I think that's when the governments of the West will immediately abandon democracy and simply impose military rule. But when they do that, they can't go back to democracy anymore, and then others will try to win power and rule the people, right? So there is always for everything that goes bad, there is an opportunity for things to be righted again, right? To right the wrongs. Yeah, the public seems so docile, yeah. Thank your audience from the heart on this live, yeah. Thanks for watching, yeah. All right. Migration was all right. I had this idea about migration, right? Immigration to the West, right? One theory is it's just meant to erase us, but you can only do that as long as the economy keeps running, because the elites, they want to stay rich afterwards too. They want to have their massive their slave populations working for them, even if they want to replace us. The economy needs to keep going on. So migration that was supposed to increase GDP, global domestic product, for our nations, but then it didn't. In 2023, a research came out in the UK saying that their GDP was no longer growing, or just like 0.2% a year or something. So now they have like millions of migrants on welfare, people who are unable to be educated. You can't educate everyone. We have our own stupid people among our own race, right? Imagine we would import other people's stupid people and find out that we can't educate them. Wow. Now we're stuck with feeding them, right? And so these people, a lot of them will never have jobs. They're permanent dependents, which is bad also for the elites. For a while, they can make money off of providing services to these dependents, but only for as long as the middle class can still afford to pay taxes, which is not infinite, right? Especially if you want to replace the white middle class with these immigrants, then who exactly is going to do the work in the future if you don't have competent electricians anymore? You don't have competent managers, or maybe managers are not a good example, but if you don't have competent engineers anymore, right, then stuff is just going to stop working. It's going to fall apart. The whole technology stack that the West was based on may come to an end. I don't think the elites want that to happen. I think they will want the infrastructure and the economy to continue operating even while they are replacing us. So basically, imagine you have an airplane full of white people and they're trying to replace all the passengers with black people from Africa while the plane is still flying, and they're also swapping out the pilots and the staff while they're doing all that. That sounds like what they're trying to do. But they do want that economy to keep growing, right? Because they still have to compete with China, right? And they have to compete with Russia. So this is why it's so bizarre. In the middle of a war against Russia, I mean, they tell us, the media tells us we're at war with Russia. In the middle of this war with Russia, they're trying to replace our people and destroy our economies with immigration. That's just so unbelievably dumb. Why are they doing this? I can't make sense of that. There have to be like ulterior motives, like, you know, satanic rituals or whatever, because logic and reason don't explain what's going on here. This is just absolutely bizarre. Right, yeah, seriously, why does everybody think everyone can be educated to achieve the same level? No, you need different kinds of intelligence that are either innate or difficult to adopt. So how much longer will the working few care to keep paying taxes? Yeah. And yeah, so maybe some final notes on. Did you see who? Did some of you see that new the highest grossing animation movie ever came out of China called Ne Zha 2? Ne Zha 2. I saw an explanation of what that movie's about. Basically, it's about an analogy. The West, in this movie, the Western leaders, basically, or characters representing the West, claim that they are divine and holy and good, and everybody else is bad and demonic. And then, of course, Ne Zha, this character in the Chinese movie, turns it all around and exposes the holy, saintly leaders as being the real demons, right? So they turn it around. That's why it was such a hit in China. You should look up the explanation. There's an explanation video on YouTube about this movie. And I think Western reviewers might not get it, so they might not understand what the movie is about, right? Yeah, leftist and logic don't mix, right? What if you just stop working out? If you could stop working while somehow growing some food somewhere, then yeah, why not? If all of us would do it at once, we would have checkmate against the elites, right? What kind of music do I listen to lately? Just synth wave, synth pop, and I also listen to classical music. Do you believe that Chinese people have higher IQs than Europeans? No, not on average, because they don't test their rural populations. They test only their urban student populations. Yeah, so of course they come out higher than, you know. I think it's not really true. Yeah, why are there no political entities protecting the Europeans? Exactly. That's the real difficulty. I've always wondered that. You know, look at the UK. You have like Reform, which is just treason. It's just controlled opposition, and so on. So yeah. All right. I ran out of bullet points that I wanted to discuss for the stream. I'm gonna post the stream to my YouTube channel at Johannes at the Great Johannes, and also to my Substack newsletter at jmk.info. So you can subscribe there as well if you want to. And you can follow me on Twitter, X, at JohannesMKX. All right. I'm going to round this live stream off, then, and I'll post some clips to this channel. I'm using 2 channels now. So this channel where I'm streaming now, I will post my live stream clips, and I have another channel which you'll see where I post new, new videos for the main. Right? All right. See you next time.